Don't you understand what I'm trying to say?
2 years, 35 songs. Artists who walked out of nowhere, hit the top of the American charts, and then, by circumstance, by bad luck, by the brutal math of the music industry, never got back there. Some of them tried, some of them didn't. Some of them didn't even want to. What they all have in common is this: one song, fully formed, that captured exactly how America felt at that specific moment, and then refused to leave. 1965 was the year the British invasion was at full force and American artists had to fight for every inch of radio space. 1968 was one of the most fractured years in U.S. history. Assassinations, Vietnam, protests in the radio still played songs an entire generation never forgot. Today we're going through both years, entry by entry, with the stories behind the songs that most music history skips over. Stay with us to the end, because the final entries on both lists are the ones nobody saw coming, including the people who made them. Hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next one. Now, 1968 first. Number 1, Those Were the Days, Etch Mary Hopkin.
We'd fight and never lose, for we were young.
1968 was loud. The Vietnam War was on every television screen. Protests were rolling through every major American city. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated in April, Robert F. Kennedy in June. The country was in shock, and the news cycle didn't stop. And then, in the middle of all of that, the radio slowed down for a song about nostalgia. Those Were the Days was a melody built on a Russian folk song, adapted into English lyrics by Gene Raskin, and brought to the world by a 19-year-old Welsh folk singer named Mary Hopkin. Discovered by Paul McCartney on a British television talent show and signed directly to Apple Records. The song didn't need aggression or rebellion to break through in 1968. It carried memories of youth, of friendship, of days that felt permanent when they were happening. It climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, sold millions worldwide, and became one of the most globally recognized songs of the year. Hopkin never repeated that chart position in the United States. What she left was one song that still stops people mid-sentence when it comes on, 50+ years later. Number 2, Fire Ent, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown.
Oh, girl, in the middle of your little world.
In a year when performances were already becoming more theatrical, Arthur Brown redefined what theatrical meant. Fire was not a song you heard passively. Brown performed it in face paint, wearing a flaming metal crown above his head. The stage presence was confrontational. The vocal delivery was operatic and unhinged simultaneously. The song climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was an international sensation. Brown's commitment to extreme performance style, the kind that in 1968 had no precedent in mainstream rock, got the song everywhere. And it also made everything that came after impossible to follow. No second single could exist in the same creative space as Fire without looking like a lesser attempt at the same idea. Brown himself acknowledged the trap. The song was the ceiling and the walls at the same time. Number 3, Classical Gas and Mason Williams. No lyrics, no vocals. An instrumental piece that blended classical guitar technique with a pop arrangement. Written and performed by a man who was not primarily known as a musician, Mason Williams was a television writer, then the head writer for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, and it still reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and completely dominated the easy listening charts in 1968. Classical Gas won 3 Grammy Awards: Best Instrumental Composition, Best Contemporary Pop Performance Instrumental, and Best Instrumental Arrangement. Williams never charted at that level again on the pop side. What the song proved is that the absence of words is not the same as the absence of meaning, and that audiences in 1968 were willing to stay with something for 3.5 minutes that gave them nothing to sing along to. Number 4, Judy in Disguise with Etz John Fred A&D, his Playboy band.
Come to me tonight, I've taken everything in sight.
The title is a direct parody of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The band was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1968, at the exact moment the Beatles were in India. Beneath the playful surface, the upbeat tempo, the novelty lyrics was a track built with real craft. The arrangement was tight, the hook was instant, and the band had enough live experience to execute it cleanly. It was their first and only top 40 entry. The combination of novelty concept and pop precision that made it work in January 1968 was also the thing that made it nearly impossible to replicate. One perfect intersection of moment and material. Then silence. Number 5, Ode to Billy Joe and Bobby Gentry.
There's 5 more acres in the lower 40 I got to plow.
This is one of the most studied one-hit wonders in American pop history, and the study has never produced a definitive answer to the central question. Bobby Gentry wrote the song herself, which in 1967 and 1968 was not the standard for female artists being pushed by major labels. The lyric is a Southern Gothic narrative, a family eating dinner on the day Billy Joe McAllister jumps off the Tallahatchie Bridge, told from the perspective of a narrator who knew him. The song never explains why he jumped. It never explains what he and the narrator threw off that bridge earlier in the story. Gentry has never explained it. Not in 1967, not in any interview since. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 4 consecutive weeks in the summer of 1967 and remained culturally active well into 1968. It became a phenomenon not despite its ambiguity, but because of it. Listeners couldn't finish with it. The mystery kept pulling them back. Gentry never had another comparable pop hit in the United States. She stepped away from the spotlight on her own terms, leaving the story unresolved in both the song and the career. Number 6, Nobody But MEN, The Human Beings. Fast, relentless, and built entirely on momentum. The Human Beings didn't write Nobody, but Me the Isley Brothers recorded the original in 1962, but their 1968 version took it from regional novelty to national hit through pure energy. The track hit the Billboard Top 10 and became one of the defining garage rock recordings of the year. It has since resurfaced in film and television soundtracks across multiple decades, used most prominently in Kill Bill Vol, one without ever translating into a second charting single for the band. One explosive moment that kept getting rediscovered long after the band had stopped being a going concern. Number 7, Reach Out of the Darkness and Friend, A&D Lover.
So groovy now that people are finally getting together, thinking.
Released in late 1967, this song found its real audience in 1968, which was one of the worst years imaginable to be making music about optimism and communal faith in humanity. And yet, it worked precisely because of that context. When everything around it was fractured, a song that said people should reach out to one another landed differently than it would have in calmer times. It hit the Billboard Top 10 and briefly became one of the cleaner sonic symbols of the flower power movement at a moment when that movement was already being tested by political reality. Friend and Lover never charted at that level again. The wave that carried them past. Number 8, Angel of the Morning, next Merrily Rush, A&D The Turnabouts.
Just call me Angel of the Morning.
Written by Chip Taylor, the same writer who wrote Wild Thing Angel of the Morning, arrived in 1968 as one of the most emotionally direct ballads on pop radio. The production was soft. The lyric was unflinching about its subject matter. A woman making a choice and refusing to attach shame to it. For 1968, that was a specific kind of courage in a 3-minute pop song. Merrily Rush's vocal delivery was warm and controlled. The song reached the Billboard Top 10. It has since been covered multiple times, most successfully by Juice Newton in 1981, which introduced it to a second generation. Rush never reached that chart position again, but the song outlived the moment. Number 9. The Horse-Ench Cliff Noble's A&D Company. Here is the specific historical detail the original transcript gets right and that most discussions skip. The lead singer of the band did not appear on the recording. The horse was supposed to be the B-side to a vocal track. When DJs flipped the record, they played the instrumental B-side. The instrumental, driven entirely by horn arrangements and a groove that didn't stop, reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and dominated the R&B charts. Cliff Nobles and Company never repeated the achievement. The accident turned out to be the peak. Number 10. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida Iron Butterfly. The title is allegedly a slurred, intoxicated version of In the Garden of Eden. The song is 17 minutes long in its album form. The radio edit cut it to under 3 minutes, and even in that form, it only reached the Billboard Top 30. What the chart position doesn't capture is the cultural impact. The album In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida sold over 4 million copies in the United States alone, one of the first rock albums to do so. The extended drum solo in the middle of the track became a standard feature of album-oriented rock. The dense, heavy layering of sound laid direct groundwork for what would become hard rock and heavy metal. Iron Butterfly never reclaimed that level of mainstream attention. The song was too large and too different from anything around it to generate a logical follow-up. Number 11. Girl Watcher, N. The Occasions.
I'm a girl watcher. I'm a girl watcher.
The Occasions were a soul-influenced pop group from Wilson, North Carolina. Girl Watcher was initially released regionally, made little noise, and was nearly forgotten before a national re-release sent it to the Billboard Top 5 in 1968, eventually selling over 1 million copies. The song is as straightforward as its title, a sunny, hook-driven piece of summer pop with no pretensions. The band received a Carolina Beach Music Association Hall of Fame award in 2003 for the song. Their time at the top of the national charts was measured in weeks. Number 12. MacArthur, Park-Ench, Richard Harris.
Think that I can take it, 'cause it took so long.
6 minutes and 50 seconds. Lyrics comparing a ruined love affair to a cake left out in the rain. An orchestral arrangement that took up more space than most radio stations in 1968 were comfortable with. And Richard Harris, primarily known as a film actor starring in Camelot in 1967, delivering it as though the stakes were genuinely operatic. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the most debated pop songs of the decade. Critics found it absurd. Audiences kept buying it. Harris never matched that chart position again. The song has since become a standard, recorded by dozens of artists, most successfully by Donna Summer in 1978. Number 13. Green Tambourine, Ench the Lemon Pipers.
My green tambourine.
Written by Paul Leka and Shelley Pinslika, would later co-write Nana Hey Hey Kiss Him Goodbye, Green Tambourine reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in February 1968. The Lemon Pipers were a psychedelic pop group from Oxford, Ohio, and the song pushed bubblegum and psychedelic production into the same space with surprising efficiency. The success arrived so fast that the band had no infrastructure to follow it. They released additional material, struggled to find a direction that matched the moment, and faded. One of the cleaner examples of a band whose first number 1 was also their last. Number 14. Playboy Engine, Deb. The transcript names these artists as Gene and Debbie. The correct names are Gene Thomas and Deb Neville, a Nashville-based country pop duo who recorded as Gene and Deb. Gene Thomas had minor regional success in the early 1960s and had co-written songs recorded by Roy Orbison and Bobby Goldsboro before the British invasion effectively closed the window on his style. Playboy, written by Gene Thomas himself, was released in 1968 and climbed to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100, selling over 1 million copies and earning a gold disc from the RIAA. The duo released one album, Here and Now, off the strength of the single. No follow-up charted at a comparable level. The song represents the specific sound of late 1960s country pop crossover warm harmonies. Clean production, romantic subject matter delivered at the exact moment that sound had its narrowest window. Number 15, Grazing in the Grass, Hugh Masekela. Hugh Masekela was not a one-hit artist by any international measure. He was a South African jazz trumpeter whose career spanned decades, who had studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London and the Manhattan School of Music in New York, and who was a significant figure in both jazz and the international anti-apartheid movement. What Grazing in the Grass was, specifically in the American pop market, was a crossover anomaly. An instrumental driven by trumpet melody and an irresistibly rhythmic groove, it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July 1968, one of the very few instrumentals to do so that decade. For U.S. pop chart purposes, it was his only appearance at that level. His jazz career continued to develop on its own terms, entirely separate from what happened to this one recording on the American pop side. Now, 1965. The year the British invasion was at its peak, and American artists had to find the gaps. Subscribe if you haven't yet. The second half of this list has some of the stranger production stories in 1960s pop history. Number 1. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, and the Silky. The Silky were a British folk group from Hull. Their recording of You've Got to Hide Your Love Away was produced by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, who also played on the track alongside George Harrison. The production gave it a restraint and introspection that separated it from the psychedelic direction Lennon's own version of the song was pointing toward. In 1965, with the folk movement expanding American radio's appetite for acoustic-led material, the Silky's version found a specific audience. It stands as one of the cleaner examples of a cover version charting on the strength of its interpretation rather than its origin. Number 2, Liar and the Castaways. Garage rock at its most direct. Raw, fast, built around a falsetto vocal and a sudden screamed release that was unlike almost anything else on American radio in 1965. The Castaways wrote and recorded it quickly. It spread from a regional Minnesota hit to a national one through sheer energy, and it hit the Billboard Top 20. The band released subsequent material and never came close to that chart position again. The song has since appeared in film and television repeatedly, most prominently in Good Morning Vietnam. Number 3, The Jerk, The Larks. 1965 was a year of dance crazes. The twist had already peaked, but the appetite for dance-oriented singles remained. The Jerk arrived purely as a functional party record. It named a dance, it supplied the rhythm to execute it, and it asked nothing else of the listener. The Larks, an R&B group from North Carolina with roots going back to the early 1950s, hit the Billboard Top 10 with it. They never matched that position again. The song's entire purpose was to get people moving. It succeeded. Number 4, The Boy from New York City, The Ad-Libs.
Come and see how he walks.
A doo-wop influenced soul track from a mixed-gender New Jersey group, built on bright harmonies and a clean, city-specific energy that caught a moment in American pop when doo-wop was transitioning into something newer without fully leaving what it had been. The Ad-Libs reached the Billboard Top 20 and disappeared from the national chart conversation almost immediately after. The song has had a longer life as a standard, most successfully covered by Manhattan Transfer in 1981. Number 5, Goldfingered, Shirley Bassey. Shirley Bassey had a long and distinguished career in British pop and cabaret long before and long after this moment. In the United States, for mainstream pop audiences in 1965, Goldfinger was the introduction. John Barry's arrangement was cinematic in the literal sense. It was written for the third James Bond film, and Bassie's delivery treated the lyric as something genuinely dramatic rather than as a soundtrack obligation. It became her biggest pop chart entry in the United States, not because it was her best work in absolute terms, but because the cultural moment of the Bond franchise in 1965 gave it an amplification no purely musical promotional campaign could have manufactured. Number 6, I Got You, I Feel Good, James Brown. James Brown was not a one-hit artist. He had multiple R&B chart entries before and after 1965 and remained a significant figure in American music for decades. For mainstream pop audiences who tracked the Billboard Hot 100, I Got You was the specific moment when soul and funk crashed into commercial radio with enough force to be impossible to ignore. The horn arrangement, the drum pattern, Brown's vocal performance, none of it had any precedent in pop chart terms at that level. It reached number 3 on the Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. It is now one of the most recognizable recordings in American music history. For the purposes of this list, it represents the moment soul stepped directly into the pop mainstream and changed the weight and feel of what was acceptable on commercial radio. Number 7, The Byrds, The Bees, Jewel Akins. Light-hearted, melodically smooth, easy to program at any time of day. The Byrds and the Bees reached the Billboard Top 5 in early 1965 and became one of the year's more cheerful radio staples. Jewel Akins was a Los Angeles-based singer who had recorded without national breakthrough before this. The song's combination of familiar lyrical metaphors, clean production, and approachable melody made it something radio programmers could slot anywhere. Akins never charted nationally at that level again. Number 8, Eve of Destruction, Barry Maguire.
Don't you understand what I'm trying to say?
Barry Maguire had been a member of the New Christy Minstrels before going solo. Key F. Sloan wrote Eve of Destruction, a blunt, exhaustive list of everything that was wrong with the world in 1965. The nuclear standoff, racial violence in Alabama, the draft, the generational disconnect between young people being sent to die and old men making the decisions. Maguire recorded it in a single take, rough and unconvinced that it was even worth a full production. That roughness is part of what made it work. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in September 1965. It was banned by several radio stations. The Broadcasting Industry Standards Committee publicly objected to it. Maguire never matched that chart position again. The song itself transcended the category of one-hit wonder. It became a primary document of what 1965 actually felt like from the ground. Number 9, Land of A Thousand Dances, Cannibal A and the Headhunters. The band was from East Los Angeles, one of the first Chicano acts to reach the national pop charts. The song itself is a list of popular dances set to a driving groove, and its most famous moment was an accident. During a performance, lead vocalist Frankie Cannibal Garcia forgot the lyrics and filled the gap by repeating na-na, na-na-na. The crowd responded. It stayed in the recording. That improvised hook became the most memorable part of the song. It pushed them onto major stages. They opened for the Beatles on the 1965 North American tour. The moment passed quickly. Cannibal and the Headhunters never reached that chart level again. The accident turned out to be the song. Number 10, You Were On My Mind, We Five. Written by Sylvia Fricker of the Canadian folk duo Ian and Sylvia, You Were On My Mind began as an acoustic folk song and arrived in the We Five recording as something more energized, fuller production. A lead vocal that balanced vulnerability and momentum, a chorus that opened outward. It climbed high on the Billboard chart in 1965 and became one of the cleaner examples of folk rock crossover at that moment in American radio. We Five released additional material without recapturing that chart position. Number 11, Wooly Bully, Sam the Sham, The Pharaohs. At the height of the British invasion, Wooly Bully was one of the few American singles to sell over 1 million copies and hold its ground on the chart. Sam the Sham, born Domingo Samudio in Dallas, fronted the band in full costume, turban, robes, sunglasses. The music was a collision of rock and roll, blues, and pure party instinct. The lyrics described a character named Wooly Bully and advised a woman named Maddie to watch out for him. There was no deeper narrative. There didn't need to be. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, kept from number 1 by the Beatles, and landed at number 1 on the year-end chart as the biggest song of 1965. Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs had a subsequent minor hit with Lil Red Riding Hood in 1966. Wooly Bully remained the defining moment. Number 12, the name Game, Shirley Ellis.
Then you say the name again with
A wordplay song built entirely on a formula. Take a name, apply a series of phonetic substitutions, repeat. The name game reached the Billboard Top 5 in early 1965 and became a genuine participatory phenomenon. People tried it with their own names, with friends' names, on playgrounds and at parties. It required nothing from the listener except engagement. Shirley Ellis had had a minor hit with The Nitty Gritty in 1963. She never matched the name game's chart position. The song has since become embedded in American popular culture in ways that go well beyond its original chart run. Number 13, Hang On Sloopy, The McCoys. The McCoys were a teenage band from Union City, Indiana. Their lead singer and guitarist, Rick Zeringer, later known as Rick Derringer, was 16 years old when Hang On Sloopy was recorded. The song was produced by Feldman, Goldstein, and Gotterer and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in September 1965. It carried no political content, no social statement, no complexity of subject matter. It was a song about a girl named Sloopy, and the narrator's insistence on her sticking around. That specific simplicity, a teenage emotional declaration with a sing-along chorus, captured something about the summer of 1965 that more sophisticated material couldn't have reached. The McCoys never repeated that chart position. Hang On Sloopy became the official rock song of the state of Ohio in 1985. Number 14, Keep On Dancing, The Gentrys. The Gentrys were a 7-piece garage rock band from Memphis, Tennessee. Keep On Dancing was originally recorded by an R&B group called The Avantis in 1963. The Gentrys covered it and released it on a local Memphis label called Youngstown Records in June 1965. It was picked up for national distribution by MGM after regional success. The song has a specific production characteristic worth noting. It was considered too short for standard radio play. The solution was to take the existing recording, let it fade almost to silence, and then replay the identical recording from the beginning. The second half of the song is the first half again, beginning with drummer Larry Wall's drum fill. Keep On Dancing reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks in October 1965, reaching number 5 on Cashbox, staying on the Hot 100 for 13 weeks, and eventually surpassing 1 million copies in sales after leaving the charts. The Gentrys kept releasing singles until 1971. None of them made the top 40. One member, Jimmy Hart, found significant later fame as a wrestling manager. Number 15, Ooh Wee Baby, I Love You, Fred Hughes.
Baby, I love you.
Fred Hughes was a Chicago soul singer who recorded for VJ Records, one of the last successful artists on that label before it collapsed in the mid-1960s. In 1965, he charted a pair of top 20 R&B singles with Ooh Wee Baby, I Love You, and You Can't Take It Away. The song crossed over to mainstream pop audiences through the warmth of his vocal delivery, unhurried, direct, built entirely on sincerity rather than technique. Hughes continued recording for subsequent labels, including Wand and Brunswick, scoring another hit with Send My Baby Back, which reached number 20 on the R&B charts. Ooh Wee Baby remained his pop chart peak, It represents the soul side of 1965 that wasn't loud or politically charged, just pure, unguarded emotion. 35 songs. 2 years. Artists who walked out of nowhere, handed radio something it couldn't ignore, and then for reasons that were different every single time couldn't get back to that height. Some of the songs were accidents, some were acts of fury. Some were calculated, and some were improvised on the spot when a performer forgot their lyrics in front of an audience. What they all share is this: they were the right thing at the right moment. Radio knew it immediately, and the moment stuck even when the artist didn't. Which one on this list is yours, the one that takes you back to exactly where you were when you first heard it? Drop it in the comments. And if this video gave you something you didn't have when you started it, subscribe and hit the bell. We'll see you in the next one.